heavens come down for. Sweat like blood goes down. He clips the shadow now. The sun is gone and sorrows come where it slithers from. Jesus, I need you now. Free me of love somehow.
Good evening, all from Ohio and Virginia. This is Through the Black. And yes, we are still resisting the satanic revolution that wants to take over our culture, our government, our world, our churches, our families. We are standing strong, lifting up a banner of truth, standing on God's word. And hey, I'm glad to be here with Pastor Shawn. Pastor Shawn, how's it going over there or down there in Virginia?
It is going. Hey, if you hear a bunch of people in the background, I got a house full of family, so there may be talking and stuff, but I'm just glad to be with you here tonight, Tom, and talking about horror shows and all kinds of stuff tonight. Just glad to be here with you.
Hey, I got this idea, I don't know, a few weeks ago, so I said, let's do it. And that's all I got. So we're going to see if it pans out. You guys, before we get into it tonight, I feel like I'm choking here. Hey, I want to tell you about a conference coming up at the end of this month. Today's the 3rd. Excuse me. Today is the 3rd, and at the end of the month, it's going to be Go Therefore, Pastor Mike Spalding. We're going to be down in Dayton, Ohio area. And July 26th through 27th, 22 days, 56 minutes, and it's going to be showtime down there. So come on down and join us. Don't be late because I'm actually opening up the conference, and I'm pretty excited about that because I get to go in there and I get to get it out of the way so I can enjoy everybody else speaking. So that's always nice. Joe Horn's going to be there, L.A. Marzulli, Dr. Judd Burton, Derek and Sharon Gilbert, Pastor Paul Begley, Carl Gallops, and Dr. Gregory Reed. Man, love that guy, Dr. Gregory Reed. It's going to be cool to see him again. So come on out. Hey, there's going to be some other people there too, namely a person by the name of Vicki Joy Anderson. So she's going to be there behind the scenes, hanging out. And speaking of Vicki Joy, I don't know if anybody knows, she has her own YouTube channel. So here it is, and we want to give a shout out to her. And hopefully, Katie will get that in the show notes so you guys can go and subscribe. But if not, yes, link will be in the show notes. Man, she's like one step ahead of me as usual. And check that out. That's going to, I'm sure, going to be super cool once she gets lots of content on there. Guys, I want to just mention real quick, we got a couple messages, and I talked to somebody that many of you guys are familiar with tonight, Nathan Reynolds, and I just want to mention a prayer for healing and health for him and his wife. Apparently they've been very sick, and folks, we believe in prayer. We believe in a God that heals, and they need a touch. So we're just praying for, all kinds of prayers for them, but a prayer for their health and for their healing. I guess his wife has been very, very sick, and he's not doing so great as well. So guys, if you want to lift them up, but anyway, we got some stuff to get into tonight, but here's a bit of good news. Shawn, you sent this over, and something is going on. And guys, we get good news. We talk about a lot of bad news, but there's some good news out there as well. It doesn't get reported on as much. Okay. We don't find out. One of the reasons is because when somebody's rescued, you want to protect their privacy, and it's it's not as exciting really for the media as much as bad news is. So, Pastor Shawn, you sent this clip over. Do you want to set it up?
Yeah, just kind of looking at some of the things today, and in a solid clip were like yesterday or the day before were a news channel there in I can't remember if it's Arizona, I believe it was, or somewhere in that area, was reporting that there was a national I forgot the name of it now, but an operation that took place with the U.S. Marshals or in some other places and other people. And they started reporting on the people in some numbers. And I thought the numbers were pretty interesting of people who were rescued. And they kind of break it down. I thought it was very interesting how they broke this down. I don't know if we're going to show the clip or not, but they were talking about 8 children were saved from actual prostitution. And I think a lot of times some of the missing children that, and I know in our area, every time we see a missing child or a missing teenager, a lot of times it's runaways for the teenagers, but the children has a lot of times been taken by the other parent and stuff like that. So I just thought it was really interesting how they broke this down and actually talked about the children that were trafficked. So that was interesting to me.
So, yeah, we're going to play the clip, Katie, if you've got that. This is good news, folks.
Hundreds of missing children have been found across the U.S.
It was part of a 6-week national operation by the U.S. Marshal Service. Fox 10's Lindsay Regas tells us how many of those children are from here in Arizona.
The U.S. Marshals targeted areas that had a high cluster of missing endangered children across the U.S. Both Pima and Maricopa counties were on the list.
There's a lot of people that take advantage of children, and unfortunately that was the case during this operation.
Operation We Will Find You 2 was conducted from May 20th to June 24th. The operation successfully recovered 123 children from dangerous situations. 77 missing children were located but found in safe living conditions. Van Bayless with the U.S. Marshals District of Arizona says 57% were recovered or located within 7 days of the Marshal Service getting involved. In Arizona, 33 children were recovered and 16 children were located as safe. This includes a 16-year-old girl from Phoenix who was sex trafficked in several states before she was found.
We know that it's a 16-year-old female out of the Phoenix greater area that unfortunately looks like was trafficked in Los Angeles and then in Miami, and then she was recovered in Michigan. All of that was through the work efforts of the Marshal Service and our partner agencies following her from missing in Arizona out to Los Angeles, down to Miami, and then in Michigan.
That case is still being investigated. Now, of the 49 cases in Arizona, Van Bayless says 8 children were likely trafficked. Reporting in Phoenix, Lindsay Regas, Fox 10 News.
So, yeah, 8 at the end right there, it says the 8 were trafficked. So it's good news, but sad at the same time that it takes a special operations when the U.S. Marshals get involved. Why ain't they involved to begin with? So
if anybody goes back in our archives, look back a few months ago, I was down on the border in Texas and talking to somebody down there that's actually right on the border. I mean, you can almost see the Rio Grande out his front door. Okay, it's right on the other side. And they knew exactly what was going on. Talked about 85,000 missing children. It's more than that now. And they are being used by the cartels. So the reason I'm saying this, hear this story about these kids being rescued. Praise God for that. And keep in mind that these kids could be anywhere. Okay. The audience of this show, guys, we can pray for our communities and say, Lord, is there anything happening here? Is there anybody being trafficked in my town, in my city? Lord, I pray, expose it, rescue them, set them free, and help us to find them. I've said this many times. It's kind of overwhelming to pray for the whole world. Sometimes I don't have faith to pray for the whole world. Sometimes I do. But, if we focus on locally what's going on, I think we would be surprised to know the truth about what kind of trafficking is happening within 5, 10, 20 miles of where we're at right now. And, it's so crazy, Shawn, that the risk that these people are taking, because if they get caught and prosecuted and sentenced, they're going to jail for a long time, hopefully. But they're still willing to take the risk. Not only the traffickers, but the people that are, using these kids and paying for these kids. It's kind of crazy that people are willing to take the risk. That they're so just fascinated, or they're so overcome with lust and perversion that they're willing to risk their freedom. They're willing to risk the shame of being caught. And it's people from all walks of life.
Yeah.
So, and you know what's crazy? And we see this happen really in a lot of these busts. There's always a pastor, right?
Yeah.
Isn't it crazy?
Yeah. Yeah. Before the show, me and you were talking about there's a shortage of pastors, and there's so much to that whole idea of what's going on. In the ministry, we talk about it quite often, but like you said, in these instances, they set up these sting operations and stuff. You see a lot of these pastors, a lot of youth pastors, a lot of or you hear, I know here locally, well, not locally, but in North Carolina, there was a pastor here of about 2-3 months ago that they found, and he had been traveling, I think, into Texas and back and forth years, and he's left a trail of young people that he's abused over the years. And so that kind of gets out there in the community, and it's just sad. The clergy itself, is not exempt. Police officers themselves are not exempt. I mean, every profession out there is not exempt from having this type of sin to happen in it. So
no, the church that I was going to, that I went to for over 5 years, close to like 7 years, the pastor there was an amazing communicator. Man, he was just he was an amazing pastor. He was really good at what he did, and I hate using the term rock star. Very humble man, very really down to earth, taught the Greek and the Hebrew, and what a good guy. He recently kind of got in a compromising situation over some inappropriate text, and he had to step down from this really big church. And then another church that I visited before, a pastor got caught in a situation, and he's refusing to step down. So here's 2 examples in my town really close to me. Both of them, one of them is about a half mile away. The other one's about 1.5 miles away. And there is a pastor crisis in the country. And I don't know if Christian colleges or seminaries are not producing pastors. Nobody wants to go into the field. Do you have any response to that?
Well, the church itself is changing, like we talked about on the beginning. The internet has played a huge part in that, not just COVID. It was going downhill before the COVID hit. But I think, when I went visiting, I started ministry a long time ago, almost 30 some years ago. And when I would go visiting, people kind of respected pastors in a way. People don't respect pastors now, and I don't know if it's just because of the news and what's happening on the news, but people don't respect the pastor anymore. You see a movement on the internet putting pastors down all the time. There's a lot of videos out there now that's doing that. And like you said, the schools are focused on producing corporate leaders instead of spiritual leaders. And that's my opinion, and I will stick by it. I have an opportunity to mentor. I've mentored some Master of Divinity people. I've mentored PhD level people. And I can just tell you, the school is not producing spiritual people. It's producing CEO type people, but it's not producing spiritual people.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're seeing that as well. Yeah. Very interesting. So, man, if you have a pastor, if you have a good pastor, if you have a pastor, pray for him. Nobody thinks to pray for their pastor. Everybody expects the pastor to pray for them, and they call on the pastor to pray for them. Pray for me. That, like, the pastor's got a line to God that we don't have, right?
Yeah.
But who's praying for the pastors? You know? And I remember one time I was teaching a Sunday school class, and I said, hey, if you guys could take just a few minutes, like 5 minutes a week, and pray for your pastor, man, he would really appreciate that. And then this girl, spoke up, and she said, only 5 minutes. I said, how much do you pray for him now? And she's like, oh, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there's a flip side to that, just like you said, and I'm not going to corner the show on this, but there's a day, I'll give you like one day our emotions can go up and down. And I'm sure you've seen this too in ways. In 1 minute, that morning I was in a hospital room praying with a young couple who just had their baby and just celebrating life. As I go out in the parking lot, I get a call that one of my church members had passed away. And I had to go and be with the family, and it was a tragedy. It was a bad accident, and so you're the swing of the emotions within a 4-hour period can be wide and difficult. And like you said, when then people are confiding in you and talking to you, and it just gets to a point sometimes you have to disconnect everything you can because you need that downtime, and it's just like you said.
Well, I'm not a pastor, but obviously there's a lot of interesting things we do here at Through the Black, and we do a lot of pastoral type stuff, right?
Right.
And yeah, I can identify with a lot of those pressures and a lot of those emotional highs and lows. So, and you do just want to go away and be forgotten. I mean, I hate, that seems pretty dramatic, but and I don't want to discourage anybody, but as long as your foundation is in God, that goes away, right? I mean, we just want to sometimes we need to get away for a day or a little bit longer, and nothing wrong with that.
No, it's kind of cool sometimes. People, you're in the business of working with God and for God and serving God and serving people. Sometimes you need to stop the serving other people so that you can recharge yourself with the Lord. You need to be at the Lord's feet yourself. And if all you're doing, and I there's times I've had to tell my wife and tell my family, I'm done for 24 hours. I'm done. And I need that space. And it's not wrong. In fact, we see that with Jesus. There were times where he would break away, but then there were times he would come in and work nonstop. So it's just, and the Lord is great, but pray for you pastors. But we need more young people. We need more young people to get involved in ministry, not necessarily as pastors, but just getting involved and getting in there and learning the ways of the Lord and helping other people. That will encourage your pastor more. If you want to encourage your pastor, pray for him and get involved.
Yeah. Don't expect him to do everything. I'm part of a church now and really part of a pastoral staff. And with all of us working, we can't seem to keep up. And I don't know how one man is expected to fulfill all these roles. So, yeah, anyway, Man, I had something else I was going to say, and it slipped out of my mind because I'm sitting over here reading the chat. But if it comes back to me, even if it's way past, I'm gonna say it. So, Pastor Shawn. So I don't know about you. This was. Let me just give a background or a history with my life and horror movies. Okay. I kind of grew up watching these movies, and I remember one of the first movies I saw that scared me. I was a little kid, man. I was real little, probably about 2 years old. I remember seeing The Wizard of Oz, and those. I think it was the monkeys. The monkeys freaked me out.
Yeah,
The flying monkeys, and I'm telling you what, yeah, I did not like those things. And then I think it was the night before I started fourth grade. It was on a Sunday night. I remember on TV was the movie Carrie. Okay. And I watched this movie, and there was a point where in the movie where there's like some kind of a dream sequence, and somebody puts some flowers on a grave, and a hand comes up out of the grave and grabs a hold of the person putting the flowers down there. And yeah, you could say I jumped pretty high. I jumped over a coffee table and jumped on the couch and hit my head. But that was kind of the beginning of, for me, just an interest in scary movies, the thrill of being frightened. Okay.
Yeah.
And, whenever I could, and it was usually going over to a cousin's house, is when we would watch these movies. We would stay up late and watch, of course, it started out with all the old movies like Frankenstein or Dracula or something like that. In our, almost in every state, they have these like late night hosts, right? Where they would host these scary movies. And sometimes it was like Godzilla and King Kong, or whatever. Right. And but then it progresses, and it gets darker and darker and darker. And when I was a teenager, I would go over to my cousin's house, and the house was right next door to a video rental house. Right, it was actually a house that somebody turned into a video rental store. So I would take my allowance and get as many movies as I can on the weekend, and we would watch them all weekend, and we had no accountability. Okay. So I kind of, grew up watching all these movies, and not healthy for me. I don't know. I mean, do you have any kind of experience like remember watching as a kid scary movies? Or
one of the first times it was on a regular TV though. It was called Snow Beast. I don't know if you've ever seen that one or not. It really wasn't a horror film, but it was one of those B-rated movies that they kind of produced for TV, I think. And it's about this like Bigfoot with white fur, I think is what it was. But they never showed the face until the very end. And at the very end, you could tell it was like a made up mask. But the thought of something being outside was always kind of in my spirit anyway. And so seeing that thing on TV and the scary music and the shock value and all of that. And then as I started growing up, I had a best friend older brother. He was like 16, 17 while we were 8, 9, 10 years old. And he would buy, we're back in a time period when you went to the movie store and got the VCR in the big blue box or the Velcro thing, and you hooked everything up. We spent like 20 hours trying to figure out how to put it together. But and he would always get this scary movie, and we would come home from skating or whatever. And his mom worked at a campground that had a skating center in it, and so we would clean up, go home, watch Saturday Night Live, and then when she went to bed, he would sneak in that scary movie. And there was some stuff in there that I don't know where he got it from, but it was pretty gory. And so I didn't like those. I don't like the slasher kind of stuff. I never did like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's some crazy stuff out there, and we probably saw it all or heard about it. And I remember hearing about the Faces of Death movies,
Oh
right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
that's something that we watched. And I, around that time and hanging out with my cousin, right about the time, between is it like 11, 12, 13, right around there,
Mhm.
I was drawn into that, and even though I was scared, these movies frightened me, I still wanted to see more.
What do you think that is? Why do we do that?
If it's like I don't know if there's like some kind of an adrenaline rush from being scared. I really don't know. There's obviously a curiosity about darkness, and some of these movies had satanic elements to it,
Mm.
and I was never interested in Satanism or being involved in anything like that. But man, I remember a movie, The Fall of the House of Usher, which was a Vincent Price movie.
I believe I
And
remember that one.
yeah, that I'm kind of getting goosebumps right now. That movie had a satanic element in it.
Mhm.
And again, the really older version with Vincent Price, which I think that might have been adapted from Edgar Allan Poe story.
Mhm.
So man, that was like made for TV. So I think there's something about the darkness. We have a curiosity about it that draws us in.
Mhm.
And watching a movie is kind of like a safe thing to do. Hopefully you're not so into it that you actually think it's real, and
Right.
you're watching it from the safety of your own living room or whatever. And it's like it could be a similar thing, Shawn, to why people watch shows like Through the Black.
Right.
And why do our shows about evil things get more views than our shows about trying to, straight up like a Bible study show? You know what I
Right.
mean?
Oh, absolutely. You talk uh, in ministry. They told us one thing: don't announce when you're going to preach on holiness and righteousness the next Sunday, because you won't have anybody. But and it's funny when you talk about good things and positive things sometimes like that. It's really weird. People don't, but you'll advertise. We won't talk about demons next week. You'll get a lot more people in
Oh,
that.
I've seen that consistently on
Mhm.
this show.
Yeah.
And hey, we know what's going on. That's why I'm the one that makes the thumbnails. And I know when I make a specific thumbnail that we're going to get a lot more views.
Mhm.
And I try not to, I'm not trying to do anything super deceptive. I'm trying to be creative when I make
Right.
these things, and I'm trying to look at it. I always look at it, from a different angle.
Mhm.
When I think thumbnails are kind of like a form of art in a way, and
Right.
I'm trying to just be less. I don't know what's the not so commercial about it
Right.
most of the time, and make it less. But anyway, yeah, we've seen that with views on this show. So there's something about it, even reading the Bible, studying the Bible, going to conferences, going to even prophecy conferences. People, what do they say? If it bleeds, it leads, right?
Right.
So if it's, if we can convince people the world's going to end or something like that, they're just eating it up. So
It's kind of like everybody wants to hear a ghost story.
yeah,
We would go camping in dead winter, and it'd be so cold, but we would want to sit out in that fire and tell a ghost story.
that's that's kind of a good way to put it. And I've sat around a few fires and listened to some ghost stories and told some.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I'm telling you what, at the times I'm listening to him, I'm like, wow, that's crazy. That's some scary stuff. Probably, may not have been true at all.
Right.
But I was convinced that night, and I'm like, okay, I got to walk back to my tent. Okay.
Yeah. And when you're laying in the tent, you're like every little sound. And it sounds weird when we say this, but think about that. We spend the rest of the night, or we spend that period of time afterwards thinking about the possibilities, every sound, everything that we see, the shadow in the tree, everything plays on that.
Yeah. My cousin and I even had a game where we would try to, what will we do if Frankenstein or the Mummy came to our room? We would, try to act like we're dead, play dead so they wouldn't, come after us or something,
It's kind of like weird when you said that. I would be the kind of one that would just try to cover my face, and the only thing would be showing is my nose. And my cousin one day, he was like, don't you want to have your arms on the outside of your sleeping bag so you can fight? I'm like, no.
No.
And
I think a lot of people will relate with this. The more covered up, like there's something magical about that blanket. Like,
right.
As long as you're under that blanket, you're going to be safe. And if I could have went all the way under, I would have, but I knew that I would suffocate if I did. So
yeah. It's kind of funny. You think, well, the demon can't see me underneath here. And I literally would make forts as a kid. The reason I would make forts on the couch, the forts, and you'd turn the pillows a certain way. If I can hide in here and it looks normal, people won't know I'm in, the ghost won't know I'm under here,
Yeah. No kidding. I started watching zombie movies and the Freddy Krueger movies, the Jason, the Friday the 13th movies. And I remember being so fascinated by them that I would draw pictures on my notebooks at school about these guys. And I don't know why I thought that was so cool. Now, this was at a time before I was saved. I would have been in 8th grade. It was right before I was saved. And for some reason, I kind of saw these guys as powerful, and I wonder if that's what a lot of people think about this, because these same characters are still like dominating our culture. The movie Halloween, I think it was made in the late 70s. It might have been 78. With Michael Myers, and of course that's the thumbnail for tonight. But the merchandising, right, of this character. I mean, how much money have they made just on T-shirts and stickers of Michael Myers and Jason and Freddy Krueger, and those are the pop culture ones. But all of these guys, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, man, I remember seeing that movie. I think my mom told me that when she went to see that movie, she walked out of the movie, And of course, when I saw The Exorcist, we saw it on one of those late night shows at my cousin's house, and we recorded it because we would usually fall asleep because it was on so late. Then we would play it back the next day. And I saw the TV version of that. And of course, it is what it is. If anybody's seen it, I don't necessarily recommend it at all. And I don't think it's a very good, if you want to watch a movie about that sort of thing, I would recommend The Exorcism of Emily Rose, because that's a very accurate portrayal of what happened, of a real life story that happened. So I actually watched that with my son and told him about the real story of Annalise. So anyway, that's what I'm wondering about. And I want to kind of have a conversation about this. These guys in these movies, they're murderers. In our culture, murderers are put in prison. Right. But these guys have like supernatural power to go into your dreams, okay? To resurrect from the dead. Nothing can stop them, right? You can shoot bullets at Jason or whatever, and he's like a walking dead dude. There's something supernatural about him. But people, in a way, worship these characters, and I see them everywhere. They're all over T-shirts everywhere I go, tattoos, and I see bumper stickers all the time. I mean, why do you think these guys have such staying power?
That's a good question. I got friends on my Facebook page, my personal Facebook page, that I witnessed to, and that's in the paranormal genre. And one of the things I've noticed in the paranormal genre, since you brought that up, is the level, like you said, it's almost like a worship. It's I got to see, Rob Zombie today. I got to meet this guy, or I got to meet that guy, or that woman, or whatever. And as I kind of sit back and watch that, and you ask that question, I do wonder what power has is it, or why are they identifying with this character? Like you said, they're murderers. There's someone decapitating a body or cutting up a body. What about that wants me to meet that person?
Yeah. I read a comment about the movie Frankenstein, and the movie opened up in theaters, I want to say in the 30s. I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. And I used to be interested, in Boris Karloff, and I forget who the director of Frankenstein was right now. But he did a few movies. Anyway, there's a story about a guy who called the theater owner in the middle of the night because he couldn't sleep because he was so frightened by Frankenstein. And he said, if I can't sleep, you're not going to be able to sleep either.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He was mad because this guy showed Frankenstein and he happened to go see it and he couldn't sleep at night. I mean, can you imagine that? I mean, we kind of look at Frankenstein now and like, man, this is harmless, Mm-hmm. And it's a great illustration of things that, we think are happening now where man is trying to play God. There's kind of an interesting story that we can talk about there. But things have went so far beyond a movie like Frankenstein. Okay.
We're so desensitized.
Yeah, desensitized. And I think one of the things that's happened, especially with some of these older shows, is people become emotionally attached to these things. And the emotion that was triggered was fear. And they are very nostalgic, sharing this stuff with their children. Like, oh man, yeah, I remember watching this in the theater when I was a kid, and it scared me. And maybe part of it is like, okay, it's just a movie, and this scared me. And I'm trying to talk all the way around this. Maybe because there's so many real life scary things, that there's maybe some kind of relief to go watch something that's fake, or that you can control, or that you can keep in the screen. So I'm mentioning a lot of things here, the emotional attachment and that. I mean, any response to these things, Shawn?
Yeah, the emotional attachment kind of to me is something that I haven't thought about before. I wonder sometimes if it's because, you notice what's the syndrome or the Stockholm syndrome where
I have that written down here.
They sympathize with the captor. How many of these movies are we finding ourselves put in a position to where we are rooting for the not so bad guy to win, but we want the not so bad guy but we want him to kill the other person. We want the murder to happen. That's kind of the way these movies kind of come out. And I don't know where I'm trying to go with that.
No, a good example of that is the movie Joker, which that movie got hyped up so much. I usually don't fall for it, but I was like, okay, I'm going to go see this movie.
Yeah.
And I went out and I saw the movie Joker, and there's a scene in there where you're rooting for Joker to shoot this talk show host.
Right. Exactly.
And it subverts the audience.
Mhm.
And I think from the perspective of a filmmaker, I think that's kind of neat. I'm not saying I endorse it. You're mind controlling people. You know what I'm saying? But you're using film to influence people emotionally.
Mhm.
Okay. When I made a few films, and for example, when I made the first film, Detestable, there were a lot of things that I didn't put in the movie because I didn't want to manipulate the situation. Now, I did use music, I did use editing when I made that movie to, because I wanted it to have a certain feel to it,
Mm.
And there's a scene in there that I even put in there, and I kind of thought it might be like a jump scene. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like where music just kind of comes out of nowhere, and it's like, and I had a little bit of fun with it, but I don't know where I was going with this, but you can use film, you can use music to move people emotionally. You can use art, paintings, poetry, and films. So they keep raising the bar so high, and I don't know if that's a good way to put it, but that we become more and more desensitized that they got to take it to the next level and to the next level. And that's something that you said. But I did have Stockholm Syndrome written down here in my notes. I'm glad that you hit that, because I think you're right, Shawn. It's interesting that not everybody, but there are some people that identify with the bad guys. So
yeah, they hit some kind of emotion. They attach, and I had it wrote down just now while you were speaking. They identify with that bad guy's emotional content. Like you said with the Joker, I found myself in I started talking to myself during that movie. Why am I rooting for him to go after these bad guys or these kids? Why am I rooting for that? And it's because the filmmaker, like you said, was telling the story and bringing you to that point. And I think that's what happens sometimes with a horror film, is that we want to see, I think it's our sin nature. I know it's our sin nature. We want to see that blood and guts, but yet we don't want to see the blood and guts. So we, like you said a while ago, it's safe. And then when we start identifying with the character, it's kind of like one thing I want to mention too, real quick. It just come to mind. When you go see a James Bond film, I forgot who the writer was and the movie producer for James Bond, but he made this comment that when his goal for writing that movie is when every man walks out of that movie theater, he's pretending to be James Bond.
Well, and it works the same way with superhero movies.
Right.
I saw Flash Gordon as a kid.
Yeah.
I saw Superman as a kid, and I thought, I got to get me a cape, because apparently that makes you fly. Thank God I didn't jump off a roof, but
yeah, I've jumped off a couch with a cape, and I did, man. Just, woof.
Yeah. Yes, I am reminded that James Whale was the director of Frankenstein, I think The Bride of Frankenstein, and a couple other horror movies. So, and there was a movie made about him that's interesting. I'm not going to go into that, but that's kind of there could be a interesting connection there with him and his lifestyle. But there's a lifestyle of a lot of people from Hollywood. So, I'll tell you, let me go this route. I wanted to, something just kind of got a hold of me, at some point, and it was right at the end of my senior year. I got really interested in film and thinking that I wanted to do film, So I read a book by a guy named Frankie Schaefer, who is the son of Francis Schaefer. Francis Schaefer, I recommend. Frankie Schaefer, I don't recommend. But there were a lot of things that were having an influence on me when I didn't really have accountability to the right people or to somebody that would just kind of protect me. And I was kind of indulging in a lot of media, like horror movies or thrillers or some sick stuff. And I can't think of an example right now, but at one point in my life, I found myself just wanting just to see the sickest thing I could. You know what I'm saying? Like this, like not so much gore, but like the sickest mind. I'll tell you a movie that I watched that creeped me out the most, that bothered me the most, was a movie called Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. And that movie really freaked me out. And if anybody, again, I'm not recommending any of these movies, but I'm just kind of being transparent here. That movie was about Henry Lee Lucas, basically. It was loosely based on his life. And it was just really creepy the way that it was made, how normal they made this guy, and how he randomly picked out victims and stalked them and waited for the perfect time to kill them. And it really freaked me out. But because it was something that was real. You know what I'm saying? And if you ask anybody, and I've done this before, like, what's scarier, Freddy Krueger or The Exorcist? They always say The Exorcist because they believe that is something that could happen in real life, okay? Where Freddy Krueger is just complete fantasy. So, obviously there is I don't know. I don't think this is too big of a deal, but this obviously goes on where people will imitate, these movies, or they'll try to carry out, their fantasies, in real life. We mentioned, I think, before the show tonight, we're talking about the Slender Man. Okay, that was just based on a story online, and these girls became obsessed with it, and they wanted to please Slender Man in real life. So how many people out there are acting out these movies? I think a good example is the movie Natural Born Killers. Now, I remember seeing that in the theater, and that was during a time where I was consuming media. And I'll tell you, that movie, I kept watching the trailers for that movie, and I was like, oh man, I was at a point in my life where I was being pretty carnal, and I couldn't overcome the temptation to not watch that movie. I knew in the back of my mind, I knew it was not going to be good for me spiritually, but I'm like, I can't say no. I want to see this movie, Natural Born Killers. And I remember seeing it, coming out of that theater, and I was with my wife, however many, this was 30 years ago. And she felt like dirty after watching that. She felt like something was on her. And I remember liking the way that I felt because I liked how they use media. And I was like, man, I want to do that with media. I want to make a movie or a video to make somebody feel a certain way, Anyway, the art form of film, very interesting. And this is a very dark aspect of it. It can be used obviously for good as well. Right. But I wonder how much real Satanism or darkness is behind the scenes. I think when it comes down to it, it's about money, but there's also the let me correct myself, Shawn. Hollywood loves to make money, but what we've seen in the last few years is them just totally have an agenda. And
Right.
their movies are bombing like crazy, and they don't even care that they're losing billions of dollars. So there are exceptions to that. And depending on how a movie is rated, will depend on how many people see it. An R-rated movie, you're going to get less people to see it. So if it's PG-13, which they try to go for that rating, then you're going to get a lot more people to see it. So money plays a part, but really they got all the money. How much do you think, or have you heard any stories where, producers, directors, I mean, we know a lot of these guys are pedophiles, right? They're abusing children. What about the dark aspect of it?
Yeah, there's so much to that question, and I was sitting here thinking about the progression of how Hollywood does things. Like one of the I wouldn't recommend this movie either, but The Shining. The Shining came out, and I think there's a ton of there's other videos and other movies that came out about that movie, kind of talking about all the symbolism that was in The Shining with Stanley Kubrick from Stanley Kubrick. But then the next movie that came out, I didn't even know that another one had came out until somebody on this. We were doing a show. I think me and Colleen were talking about something, and someone recommended on the comments that I needed to watch Doctor Sleep. And so I wasn't even prepared spiritually. I just thought, well, it's just another movie. And kind of like what you were just saying a while ago about your wife, when I started seeing that movie at the very beginning of what they were portraying in that movie, I literally felt sick. I mean, I literally felt like, wow, what am I doing? So I had to stop it. And to be honest with you, I didn't start it back for a long time because I felt like the Lord was saying, no, you don't need to watch this. But then I had someone who was involved in some things, and they were talking about this movie. And so I went and watched a little bit more of it. And I just couldn't, to this day, I haven't really finished that movie because I just could not get myself spiritually to the point where I could watch that movie and feel okay about it. And to answer your question, I think that's kind of what's happening in a way with that desensitized, that part of being desensitive or be, used to it. If you're used to some of these movies and it doesn't bother you, I would say now, Tom, if you probably would go back and see some of the things that you watched when you were younger, you would probably feel the same way. I mean, it's the growth of the Holy Spirit inside of you. And I want to put a script, I don't know if I haven't talked to Katie about this, but at some point, Psalms 101:3, I will not set anything wicked before my eyes. That Psalm kept coming to my mind while I was watching that movie. And especially when they started doing a particular ritual, and I had known people who had done almost that kind of ritual before, and it just made me sick. And I realized I was allowing this evil to be in my mind and through the gates of my eyes.
Pastor Shawn, I agree with that, and I don't watch these movies anymore. Very seldom I will watch a movie because I'll hear something about it, and I'm like, okay, I want to check this out. But a lot of times, I can't even watch this for investigative purposes.
Yeah,
and I'm just not interested. It's boring to me now in a way because we've dealt with the real thing. Okay,
right,
and it's like, okay, this is all fake. This is not how it really is. And I'm not afraid of these guys anymore. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I don't care. You bring them all on at once if they are real. Jason and Freddie and all these guys. I rebuke them in the name of Jesus. Okay, and they have to submit to the authority of Christ. I'm not. I don't care if it's Darth Vader or Voldemort. They're weak in my eyes in comparison to the power of the shed blood of Christ.
Amen.
So that's one thing. But also, yeah, of course, there is a pattern in these movies where they're trying to portray the evil guys as more powerful than the godly guys. Okay. It's usually, if they have some kind of a Christian character, it's usually a Catholic priest that's scared to death and old and, weak and can hardly walk. And he's got some kind of weakness or sin in his life. Okay. If they were ever to make a movie about a real demon or ghoul or whatever facing a Christian, it'd be a real short movie because, we have the authority of Christ. Right. So I'm not really impressed with these things anymore. Of course, they're designed to bring fear and invoke fear and emotion. And that's why people sign up for it. Why do people go to amusement parks and ride roller coasters? There's a thrill there. This is a different type of a thrill. But if, these things war against my spirit. And every once in a great while, I might watch something that's just kind of like, okay, for entertainment. And I'll be like, why did I do that? You know what I'm saying? I'm like, I wish I wouldn't have done that. And sometimes I don't make it very far and I shut it off. But, anyway, I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful for God's spirit in me, just trying to protect me and trying to guard me. So, Katie, do we have that? I don't know if she was able to get that scripture. And I didn't bring my Bible down.
As she's getting that together, we hadn't talked about this or thought about this. Yeah, there it is.
Okay.
Psalms 101:3. I will set nothing wicked before my eyes, and I hate the work of those who fall away. It will not cling to me, or shall not cling to me. I want to get your thoughts on this because I just thought about it. If I can quit coughing here for a minute. There's a trauma aspect to this that I feel like is happening. Do you think that some of this is to create trauma in people's lives through watching these films?
Why not? I think I would have to think that out a little bit, but why not? I've heard interviews and I've listened to a lot on the making of the movie The Exorcist. Like I listened to a podcast on it once. And I've read excerpts and saw sound bites and stuff. And I think the director, and I'm not going to defend him, okay, but it seemed like he really wanted to make a movie and portray somebody that hated God, a demon that hated God. And he said, this is the way they would act. Okay. I know Billy Graham's not a popular person to quote sometimes because of whoever somebody believes about him. He saw the movie and he said the fabric of the film was evil. The actual, he said it was so evil, the actual film was evil, And I thought he was, obviously he was trying to be pretty dramatic about, how wicked he thought the movie was. That's a good question. That's a real good question. And I'm sure that that in many cases, the answer is yes. There are people that make film. I don't know if I want to call it art, but are involved in the media that want to do exactly that, and you can see, the ritual stuff come through. So somebody, there was a series of movies, I think it was called Paranormal Activity. And I never seen any of them, but somebody told me that in the third one, it was like a prequel or something maybe. And they showed like a marriage to the beast type of ceremony where this little girl was in a wedding dress. So I remember I went out and I actually watched that one because I was learning about all this stuff, at the time. Now, I know I will say this, Russ Dizdar was not one who shied away from watching these movies for research. And he never endorsed them. He said, watch it at your own risk. I'm not telling you to watch it. He said, but in this movie, this is what I saw. And I remember I went up, I met him in, I only saw one movie with Russ. And he called me up. He said, hey, I'm going to go see this movie on Saturday. Do you want to come with me? And I think it was called The Right with Anthony Hopkins playing a priest. So we went up and saw that movie, and then we went out for lunch or whatever, and we talked about the movie. So he wanted to see, pretty much anything out there and find out what was being said and analyze it. So anyway, that was Russ. After I met Russ, I kind of got bored with the movies because his stories were more exciting than anything they could make up. And it's all made up. It's not real, most of it. I'm interested in a good movie, in a movie that's based on real life, but real life is more exciting, right?
Right. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I've had people. I actually had somebody on Facebook one time say, "Hey, won't you take me? I'm looking." No, he said he's looking for places to go hunt ghosts and stuff. And I said, "Hey, if you want to tag with me a couple of months, you won't want to do that anymore." And he kind of laughed. And I actually called him up one day and I said, "Hey, I've got something I'm going to be doing. You want to tag along, just kind of watch and see what's going on?" And he said, "No, I know what you do." No. It's like, okay, but it's so funny. We were talking about this before show, not to switch gears, but I know we might want to wrap up here soon, but some of these stars like Vincent Price, Nicolas Cage, the guy of Room 1408, I never forgot his name.
Cusack, John Cusack, yeah.
Yeah. Then the guy that also played the hotel owner in that movie.
Samuel L. Jackson.
Yeah. These folks play a lot of these characters in a lot of these movies. It just makes me wonder, is there something to these folks that with inside of them, or are they just able to play the bad guy good,
Yeah. And we were talking about Nicolas Cage. Like, he's got a lot of movies that have satanic elements in it, like pretty obvious, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we mentioned the movie Mandy. I have not seen that movie, but I saw the trailer and you can kind of get what it's about. But you brought up 1408, not to shift gears again, but I remember when I met Russ and I told him I had seen that movie before, and he thought that was cool. He's like, "Oh, you've seen the movie 1408." He's like, "Okay, cool." So we could talk about it. And he never necessarily endorsed these movies, but he liked he liked talking about them and analyzing them.
Mm-hmm.
And he liked it when they got it right. You know what I'm saying? And
Right.
He would criticize them when they got it wrong. So, 1408 is an example. And I was out with him one night. We were out doing our thing, doing Reap Trip, praying through the streets of Canton. And I mentioned the movie, 1408. They're like, "Oh, you've seen that too? Okay, cool. You're part of the club," because
Right.
the movie reveals truth. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you another movie that Russ liked was White Noise.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think it was Michael Keaton was in that movie. I can't remember. But he said he liked the movie because it revealed that the ghosts were not really ghosts, they were demons.
Mm.
So, anyway.
When you think about these guys and ladies playing these parts in kind of doing the evil thing, they create this following, and I think we was kind of talking about that earlier. Sometimes it's just a personality that they're following. But there was a movie, and maybe somebody in the chat will know. There was a movie that Nicolas Cage made that he was asked in an interview before the movie came out that he had to learn a particular ritual. And he said, "Yeah, we're doing that ritual in the movie. And as I'm doing the movie, and you watching the movie, you become a part of that ritual when you watch it on film." And I've been trying to figure out what movie that was that he'd done that interview with. But Nicolas Cage, like you said, and some of these folks, whether they have knowledge of the occult or not, somebody that's in the writing or in the process does know some things, and they're showing him, like you said, the truth is kind of weaved in this fantasy life that they're given, but there is truth mixed into that, or not truth, but real occult stuff that's going to be involved in it.
Yeah. And somebody said, Katie said Season of the Witch.
I bet that was it.
Yeah.
It sounds about right. It seemed like it was around 2016, 17, 18, somewhere in there, maybe.
So, but just to catch up with a couple of these comments, Josh said Nicolas Cage is a Coppola. He's related to Francis Ford Coppola. I forgot about that, actually. Yeah, that's true. And he changed his name so he couldn't ride that fame of that family name Coppola. And then this is an interesting comment, and I don't know for sure. Somebody says Christopher Lee was a Satanist. Now, maybe that's true, but I will say that there's a good interview, excerpt from like a talk that he gave where he warned people, stay away from the occult. Seemed pretty sincere. I get why people would think he was a Satanist. I'm not saying he's not. Maybe he was lying because he played Satanist in movies. And he played Dracula. So, but there's an interview where he said, stay away from the occult and don't read occult books. He said it will, I wish I could remember exactly what he said, is, it's going to destroy your soul, is what he said. And
yeah, I remember that interview. And even in that same interview, didn't he say something that the interview after he said something like that came back and said, well, have you done this? He says, well, in some respects, I've done it on film. And then he says, and don't you believe that there's people really doing it right now as we speak tonight?
Yeah.
And it was kind of like the movie, the guy was kind of like silent for a second when he asked that question.
Well, and of course, in my film Detestable, available at throughtheblack.com, I use clips from a Christopher Lee interview where he very strongly says that he believes in the occult and Satanism, and they are practicing tonight. So here we go. Yeah, go ahead, Katie.
It's well known that you have a huge interest in the occult and one of the largest collections of books.
I don't have a huge collection. Somebody wrote I had 20,000 books. I'd have to live in a bath. I have maybe 4 or 5. I have The Devil Rides Out, first edition, signed to me by Dennis Wheatley. There's a book just come out about him called The Devil is a Gentleman. And I have met people who claimed to be Satanists, who claimed to be involved with black magic, who claimed that they not only knew a lot about it, but as I said, I've certainly never been involved, and I warn all of you, never, never, never. You will not only lose your mind, you lose your soul.
So I'm not defending Christopher Lee, whatever it is. But he gave a very strong warning there. Like maybe he knows something, obviously.
Absolutely.
Well, I had a feeling this was going to be an interesting conversation, and it was. So I want to thank everybody for hanging out with us tonight. Guys, thank you for subscribing, giving a thumbs up, sharing this places like Twitter, or I guess it's called X now, Facebook, and anywhere you can put this. Send it to your neighbor, send it to your email list, text it to your mother-in-law. She'll love it. And guys, that helps us get the word out. we are all about the gospel of Jesus Christ. If it weren't for that, then we wouldn't have any reason to have a show. We believe that he is the way, the truth, and the life. We believe he is the resurrection and the life. And if you have a stronghold in your life where these types of films, this type of media has a grip on you and it's drawing you in, you can break that curse. You can break that power with the authority of Christ. Repent, rebuke it in Jesus' name. You know what? I used to think these movies were kind of exciting and stuff, but it's boring in comparison to God's word, to God's truth, to real life. And if you want a thrill, go ahead and go over to throughtheblack.com and click on the Russ tab and take some of his courses and listen to some of his stories. Because once you get a taste of real life, you're not really going to be interested in the dark media anymore. Pastor Shawn, last word.
Just go to Jesus Christ. This stuff can get into your mind and it eventually comes out in your actions. And so I think that's what the guy was really trying to say. It will mess your mind up and it will mess your life up. And I've helped several people come out of this kind of stuff. And it's the simple confession of sins, dealing with the Lord and walking with the Lord daily. And like you said, just walking in his ways. And once you start going down that path with the Lord, you're going to see so much more and encounter so much more than you can ever imagine with the Lord. And he will lead you into light. He won't lead you into darkness. And so go to the Lord here tonight in prayer and just reach out to him. Romans 10:13, all who call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved.
Amen. Amen. Guys, again, thank you for hanging out. We will see you next time. It's going to be a busy month. Don't forget about the Go Therefore conference down in at the Harvest Revival Center down in the Dayton, Ohio area. And hopefully we'll see some of you guys there. We should have some more shows this month, but we are going to be taking a break here coming up. And just hang in there with us, guys. Thanks. We'll see you next time. Bye. Hey folks, I just met the witches and Satanists, and they're going to allow me to do an interview with them, so let's see what happens.
Been